Jonathan Benjamin wants me to ask you, how does a society deal with a businessman who pollutes the air they breathe without going to a government, or if there's no government?
Yeah, probably doesn't. That is, one of the things I've discussed a number of times is the ways in which the law generated by a market for law in an anarcho-capitalist society would be imperfect. And basically the argument that I make is that as long as you have a case where the legal rule between you and me only affects us, you then have mechanisms that will tend to move you towards the right legal rules. But in a case where the legal rule between you and me affects him, now it's not clear. You now have what we refer to in other contexts as market failure, a case in which the private rationality may not lead to the optimal result. And I think air pollution may well be an example that I could certainly imagine that you might end up with an equilibrium where it isn't worth my bearing the cost of stopping you polluting his air. But if I stop you polluting I'd like to stop you polluting my air, but since I get only a small part of the benefit if I stop you from polluting, and you get all of the savings if I don't stop you, that therefore I may not be willing to spend enough resources to get you to change. But again, it'll be a long discussion. But my short answer is I do not think that the best legal system I can think of institutionally will produce all of the right law. Only it'll produce more of the right law than any other system I've got. Right? Let me go back a step. There are two ways in which you can make political arguments. The wrong way, I think, is to argue about what outcome you want, because that assumes you can get it. So suppose we're talking about entirely different issues. Suppose we're talking about income redistribution. And somebody says, I believe that it would be a good thing if the rich had less money and the poor had more money. And you could argue whether he's right or wrong, but suppose you agreed with that. And he says, therefore, we want a government that's got the power to take money from the rich and give it to the poor. And the first question I would ask is, why do you expect it to do that? That is, given that it's got the power to take money from people, why won't it take money from whoever is politically weakest and give it to whoever is politically most powerful? Isn't that a more sensible strategy with people running the government than going out and doing nice things for poor people? And I think if you look at real income redistribution in societies like ours, you observe a mix, that the government does some things for poor people to buy their votes, and it does other things that are buying the votes of the not poor at the expense of the poor. So I think a more useful argument is not to say what end do I want to get, you can talk about that too, but rather what will be the results of alternative institutions. Not what would they do if everybody did what I wanted them to do, but what will they do if people do what they actually will do. So that from that standpoint, I think it is imprudent to say we'll give government power because if they do use it for the right things, it'll be good, unless you have a reason to expect the government to use it for the right things.
Human beings are meant to be free. Not to be free to aggress upon each other, but to be free from aggression from each other.
Of not having a fire station? Because people are afraid of not having a court system? Because people are afraid they might not have utilities? As if people aren't going to try to sell these things to you left and right once the state's monopoly is abolished. Fear, fear, fear. That is how the state survives.
30 times less murder in Somalia than in Detroit. Now, I'm not saying Somalia is a paradise by any measure.